The strike at Sibanye-Stillwater's gold operations is headed for 6 months now. Negotiations with union AMCU continue to be at a deadlock along with production there. But what has this meant for the other major unions at Sibanye-Stillwater, being the NUM, Solidarity and UASA and their members? We find out with a perspective from the respective representatives of the unions, that is Franz Stehring, who is the lead negotiator at UASA, as well as Gideon du Plessis, the General Secretary of Secretary General of Solidarity. Oh my, you can tell my mining lingo is not up to scratch.
What's in the title?
All right, gentlemen, I mean, it is worrying given that the members of AMCU have down tools now for almost 6 months. It's still since November. We'll just do that math. What has that meant for your members? Are your members going to work? Gideon, if I begin with you.
Yes, since November when the strike commenced, they've been going to work. So our membership attendance was between 70 and 80%. Those who could not get to work was due to them being prevented or intimidated. So the company made provision for workers to be transferred to shafts where there were less intimidation and also the risk of fires. And they also accommodated workers in their offices where they turned into rooms or hostels. So then it enabled them to go to work, but the AMCU attendance was between 6 and 7% during that period. But luckily the essential services attendance was between 90 and 95%. So obviously that risk has also been attended to, and that's also good under the circumstances.
Okay, I mean, Franz, weigh in here and just to explain to us, I mean, when we're talking about essential services in mining, what do we mean by those workers?
Basically, if you look at it, let's look at it, you've got basically two sets. You've got a normal production section, and then you've got places, as Gideon has referred to, that were placed under care and maintenance because of the violence and that. And we specifically refer to Driefontein at this point in time. And those people from us and from the National Union of Mine Workers were then transferred to Kloof and to other shafts to assist with the production so that we can carry on. So for all practical reasons, if you look at Kloof mine with their shafts and Beatrix, production went on fairly well at that point in time. Also what happened is during the December period and January, February, a lot of the AMCU members came back to work and joined the other three unions, which basically has pushed up the attendance far above what was expected.
How much is a lot here? Because numbers in this particular strike are so important. It's what's holding this entire process back from, you know, who is actually awarded as the majority union or not. So how much are we talking here?
Let me put it to you this way. Before the strike, together the three unions that have signed, UASA, Solidarity and the National Union of Mine Workers, we were standing at around about 43%. And with a verification that, independent verification that Tukiso did last week, we are currently standing at 54%.
Right.
Which means that most of the people that has crossed the floor has pushed us into a position of a majority union, and we then has signed.
Well, according to that exercise that Sibanye has done, having contracted that investigator, of which AMCU disputes on a number of levels, disputes on the method of, in fact, investigating the numbers, and disputes on being largely placed in the dark throughout the entire process, they claim. But for me, what I'm trying to find out, because that is only going to be verified at the courts, I do understand.
In the courts at Friday.
Yeah, on Friday. So until Friday, I'm just really trying to get a perspective of what has been happening this past 6 months. So you say many of your members have been transferred to shafts where there wasn't any violence or intimidation. I'm just wondering if were existing AMCU workers not there at those shafts as workers?
Let me try and put it to you in perspective. What happens if you look at Sibanye as a whole? The stronghold of AMCU is Driefontein.
Right.
Whereas Kloof operations and Beatrix operations is basically more the NUM stronghold together with Solidarity and UASA. So therefore they do have representation at Kloof and Beatrix operations, but not as much. In fact, at Kloof operations, the mine were running at around about 60% with regards to production, taking cognizance that we did not implement, or the mine did not implement night shift.
Okay.
Because of the violence and the intimidation that happens during the night shift. So therefore, they concentrated on day shift only, and blasts were done on a cycle method throughout the period.
Okay, so gentlemen, my question to you is, on Friday, the court decides whether the verification exercise is legitimate or not, or we have to go back to the drawing board. What happens if they find against this? Gideon?
Well, obviously you have the two scenarios. The one is then the strike will continue if it finds that there were any defects in the process. It's highly unlikely, but then the strike simply continues. The status quo will continue. I've got a feeling the strike is about to come to an end because there's major resistance from AMCU ranks. We know they walked away recently from a mass meeting, so the strike is imploding. But if the court obviously rules in favor of Sibanye, and then immediately the agreement that we've signed get extended to AMCU, and if they continue with the strike, it basically means that it's an unprotected strike and their members can be dismissed. So we're at a ninth point, but at this stage, no matter what the outcome is, we're all losers.
Yeah, for sure, because in the event, I'm going to talk about the other case scenario whereby the court finds against the findings of the verification report. And therefore, Sibanye-Stillwater is not in a position to extend the same wage deal that they did to you, to AMCU doesn't have to accept that, and the strike remains protected. AMCU is wanting a different kind of wage deal. They want the wage deal that the CCMA put on the table as fair. In the event that that does happen, what's your guys' response? Franz?
I want to take a step back, and I want to clarify the issue of the deal that the CCMA has placed on the table. During the wage negotiations at Birchwood, the very same deal that was placed by the CCMA on the table is the actual one that we have signed.
No, but then that can't be the case. I imagine that, AMCU are learned people. Joseph Matunja wouldn't resist a deal that, you have signed, but the CCMA say it's something different. I don't see how that would work.
Well, basically what happened is we had a deadlock between the three unions, and AMCU had a deadlock.
Yeah.
At the point in time, the CCMA intervened, and they then broke a deal with the three of us and said, that's the deal on the table. AMCU at that point in time turned around and said, but they want 1,000 rand a month. And then they walked off. So basically, for all practical reasons, the expected deal, or the deal that the CCMA has placed on the table at the point in time, that's the deal that was signed by the three unions and the company.
All right, okay. I think I just need to get a little bit more clarity on AMCU, because that doesn't seem to be where they are coming from.
Correct. The workers accepted the offer. What was recently made by the company, Joseph Matunja rejected it. The worker committee and the regional...
You say AMCU workers accepted the
offer. The regional group accepted the offer. Joseph Matunja was the one who rejected it because he shifted the goalpost.
Except I went out to Driefontein a couple of weeks ago and I spoke to the workers. In fact, Joseph Matunja wasn't even there, because I was interested in, how do you go throughout Christmas? How do you go for so many months? You guys are breadwinners, you're not taking any money at home. And they were saying that we are on strike because we told Matunja, in their words, that we want a better deal for our services. So it wasn't that Joseph Matunja walked away.
It depends on who you're talking to. Remember, during a strike, there's a group who's getting paid to cause havoc, to intimidate people, to get the strike going, to jump at, if they have mass meetings, they will jump up. They will say, we accept it. They will boost Joseph because they're getting paid to do that. It's called an A-team. That's what happened at a strike, during a strike. You must go and talk to those workers who went back home, who cannot afford to stay here. You must go and talk to the regional leadership who accepted it. So, and that's the problem, workers are used as cannon fodder. And it's really a labor relations tragedy that is taking place.
Gentlemen, let's go to a quick break because I just want to get your brief thoughts on the position that Sibanye actually finds itself in. Now we have found that Sibanye-Stillwater has had to raise capital to prepare for a rainy day, particularly in the gold sector. It's had to raise capital from shareholders to compensate for the fact that gold operations are not performing to their maximum capacity. We'll have that discussion in just a bit. But still continuing with the story of Sibanye-Stillwater and the latest at the gold operations following a 6-month wage deadlock between themselves and AMCU. I still have the unions that did sign a wage deal with the company in studio with me, and that's Franz Stehring, who is the lead negotiator at UASA, and of course Gideon du Plessis, the General Secretary at Solidarity. Yay, you got it right that time. I mean, gentlemen, before we went to the break, we were talking about the fact that Sibanye is raising capital to help the pressure off its balance sheet. As union stakeholders, how are you feeling about the fact that, you know, there is pressure to Sibanye, because that ultimately means pressure to jobs, of which you know the company has announced that it needs to cut thousands of jobs. Are you worried? Are you worried about the impact on your members? Gideon?
We are. You know, it's a catch-22 situation. On the one hand, AMCU showed in 2015 that they will go on strike because they will try to outperform the other unions. They're doing it the same now, so obviously the company must bring that kind of approach to an end because it will also spill over into the platinum strike. So it's a strategic decision taken by the company, but in the end all the workers will pay the price. First of all, AMCU members will be worse affected because their stronghold, like Franz said, is Driefontein. There will be a massive retrenchment there that will be AMCU members because they are striking basically on the deck of a ship that's going down, you know, so that's the problem. So, but our workers, our members are also affected. So, but in the end, Neil Vroeneman and Joseph Matunja, obviously they have their own standoff, and that's very much part of it. But also, if Vroeneman,
so do you think it's personal though? That standoff.
Look, it's a standoff because Joseph also knows if the Lonman business gets transferred over to Sibanye, obviously their membership gets diluted, and he also knows that the retrenchment there are imminent. So the fact of the matter is he also needs to position himself now for that takeover, and Neil Vroeneman needs to do the same. So obviously it's tragic, you know, that we end up with such a situation.
Right. I mean, when you negotiate on behalf of your workers, on your members, do you not do so in what you believe is the best interest for them? Well, and then do you not believe that Joseph Matunja is essentially fulfilling the same role, wearing the same hat as you guys, and trying to get the best deal for his workers?
One must look at it from a different view.
Sure.
From our opinion, we are quite sure that what we did was the right thing. Okay. And therefore, when we signed the actual deal in August last year, we made sure that the deal that we signed off would be able to carry through. In other words, that it's worth our while, as well as giving us the necessary job security for the future. And you would see that the percentage doesn't vary much from the other mining companies in the gold sector. So they're all in the same ballpark and varies with a couple, a point something percent here and there. So they're all in the same ballpark, they deal with the same market and everything and that. So we were of the opinion, and we are still of the opinion, that what we did was responsible. Fact of the matter is, if you do, what happens if you don't do it? And we are of the opinion that the strike by itself has placed some pressure on the company so that the company cannot perform what it should be able to perform.
No, for sure.
Hence the fact that if you look at a mine like Driefontein, which is basically working year on life of mine, you know, you need to cut. And basically what Joseph Matunja did together with AMCU was basically to say, there's it, we're not interested, we don't worry about it.
Right, right. Gentlemen, there's now a real risk, real possibility that this strike is going to spill over into the platinum sector, or rather platinum sector labor negotiations are coming up. That's correct. because I think the
Correct.
court did rule that
Yes.
AMCU couldn't proceed with the strike in the platinum sector.
Yes.
How do you see those negotiations going?
Well, the thing is, the workers in the platinum sector are still carrying the burden of the 2014 strike in terms of debt. So, and this obviously sends a very strong signal. And when Joseph buzzed a lot of Lonmin workers in to participate in the secondary strike, there was a reluctance, and they did it for one day. So I don't foresee that we will have the same kind of confrontation, the same kind of conflict,
Sure.
because the workers are punch drunk. And I've got a feeling, you will also see that there will be workers joining other unions, because, they can see they're getting poorer and poorer. Remember, the guys in the gold sector have lost 56,000 Rand on average so far. They've lost it, it's gone.
Sure. Franz, just closing words from you on the how you potentially see the negotiations in the platinum sector going. And also, do you not think that the workers, deserve that 12,500 Rand that was promised to them in Marikana all these many years ago that many have not realized?
If you look at total cost to company, we're above it. And that's where the difference is.
Then if you look at the pay gap between your workers and your management on the top, which is a problem actually for South Africa across the whole, that inequality gap, world experts all over have said that it is not sustainable. Everybody needs to foster inclusive growth. So you can't just look at cost to company, no?
No. You basically have to, because you've got to compare
Executive
apples with
pay
apples.
though? Okay.
Because the upper echelon from supervisors to management are basically, if you look at platinum per se, Lonmin specifically is total cost to company. You look at Anglo Platinum, they're on basic salary, but it's calculated total cost to company. And you also have, within the Anglo model, you have only the 15% between gaps,
Sure.
between the different categories, from your category A to your D1 level. So therefore, if you do the comparison at that bottom portion, the comparison is quite good if you do work on total cost to company. The problem comes in that Joseph, in the past negotiations, has basically pegged the people at Platinum's basic salaries on the pensionable emolument, which means that whatever they earn in terms of their pension fund and the overtime and standby allowances and that is pegged at 2013 salary.
Sure.
So therefore he's basically used that to fund himself and therefore outpriced himself.
Gentlemen, you know what, I am out of time, and I know that there's a lot more to discuss. Certainly a follow-up conversation is due, perhaps, as those labour negotiations in the platinum sector get underway. But thanks again for your time. Of course, I was joined in studio by Franz Stehring, who's the lead negotiator at UASA, and Gideon du Plessis, General Secretary of Solidarity.